It's nearly a week now since the horrendous mass shooting in Minneapolis, where two primary school children were murdered and more than a dozen people injured. The children were praying in morning mass in the church next door to their school. This is the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey.
There are no words that can capture the horror and the evil of this unspeakable act. Children are dead. There are families that have a deceased child. You cannot put into words the gravity, the tragedy, or the absolute pain of this situation. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying.
It's yet another horrifying example of gun violence in this country. Children slaughtered in their first week of school, and it happened just weeks after another shooter gunned down workers in a New York office building. Every time we cover a mass shooting, the same questions remain. Why only in America? And will anything ever change? So we wanted to dedicate today's episode of Trump 100 to this controversial issue. I speak to two people on either side of the gun debate in America.
Today, as Americans, we grieve the brutal murder, a horrific massacre of dozens of innocent people.
In 2016, 49 people were killed in the deadliest terror attack in the US since 9/11, as a gunman who'd pledged allegiance to ISIS opened fire at a gay nightclub in Orlando.
Good morning, I'm Dara Brown. There's breaking news at this hour from Orlando, where there are reports of a shooting at a nightclub in that city. NBC's Sarah Dalloff is on the phone near the scene. And Sarah, good morning to you. What are you seeing in Orlando?
Good morning. You know, this is a huge, massive scene. It just keeps getting bigger.
Brandon Wolf was one of those in the club. He hid in the bathroom and eventually escaped amid a hail of gunfire. Two of his best friends were murdered that night. Brandon is now a civil rights and gun safety advocate and a best-selling author. He currently serves as National Press Secretary for the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBTQ plus civil rights organisation. His book is called A Place for Us. Brandon, just forgive me for asking you to repeat this. I know it's sort of going over ground that you probably, have done countless times, but you call June 11th, 2016, the last normal day of your life. That evening, you decided to go to Pulse nightclub in Orlando. You'd been there countless times before. You went with two of your closest friends that evening. Can you take us back to that night and what happened?
Yeah, I call it the last normal day because, for people like me, for people like my best friends, Pulse was a sense of normal for us. It was a community that we had carved out in a world that so often tells us we don't get to be normal, that we're always going to be different or other. And everything about it was normal. The line was as long as it ever was outside. The drinks were the same as they always were. The music was radiating through the floorboards. My best friends and I went to our usual spot on the patio where we did the most normal thing. We had conversation, we laughed, we danced. My best friend was a therapist by trade, and he always offered you a free therapy session, whether you wanted it or not, when he had had a few drinks. And that night he offered us a therapy session. Everything about it was normal until it wasn't. It was just after 2:00 in the morning when I was washing my hands at a bathroom sink, and a man filled with hate and armed with a weapon designed for a battlefield charged through the front doors of that club. In a matter of hours, with a standoff with police, he fired over 110 rounds into the club, killing 49 people, injuring 53 others, and leaving our entire community shattered. So every time one of these horrific tragedies happens across the country, I'm brought back to the night that I was laughing and dancing with my friends and then never got a chance to say goodbye.
And I presume you're brought back all the time. I mean, you know these statistics as well as anyone, but according to the Gun Violence Archive, there were 34 mass shootings in the US in the month of August alone. Of course, many of these don't even make the news. Some of them do. Last week, there was the horrific murder of two children in Minneapolis in a church. You said those events take you back to that night. Can you explain that feeling?
It's hard to explain to someone who's not been through it before. It tears at your soul when you're doing the most normal life activities, and then before you know it, you're calling someone's parents to tell them that their child is not coming home. It tears at your soul when you have a missing face at the dinner table, when there's someone gone from the birthday party. That's what these families are going through. People buried their children. There are people who have family members that are in the hospital that they're going to be looking after for a very long time to come. And so it's hard, as someone who's been through that before, not to have your heartstrings tugged at, seeing other people at the beginning of a journey that I've been on for almost 10 years now, knowing the sleepless nights, the nightmares they will have, the fact that they will replay every moment that happened in the lead up to the shooting. If I just walked this way or turned this corner, might something be different? I've carried that weight now for almost a decade, and it breaks my heart to see other communities having to do the same.
In the wake of that shooting in the church, Brandon, the mayor of Minneapolis said thoughts and prayers are not enough anymore. The shooter who killed those children purchased those firearms legally. What would, in your opinion, genuinely make a difference, stem the tide of these mass shootings?
Yeah, well, the mayor is 100% right. And listen, it was Jesus himself who decried performative prayer without the tough action that loving thy neighbor requires, right? It takes work to care for each other, to love each other. And our leaders have to do that work right now. That is what this country is crying out for, is do something. It is not enough to offer up empty thoughts and words after something like this happens. You are in a position of power, and you should use that power to stop other people from having to bury their children. And I don't have to guess what would stem the tide of gun violence in this country, because the data is really very clear. You can try to obfuscate it, you can try to whine about it, you can try to make excuses about it, but the truth is, the common denominator for America's gun violence crisis is easy access to deadly weapons. And so a whole host of policies could and would have an impact. We could implement national red flag laws that allow courts to temporarily separate someone from their guns. We could strengthen background checks and make them universal across the country. We could put money into community violence intervention programs that seek to separate someone from deadly weapons when they're in a moment of crisis. There are a whole host of things that we could do, but at every turn, right-wing Republicans in this country have eroded the protections that we've put in place and rolled them back. It was Donald Trump who closed the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention and defunded school mental health programs by $1 billion when he got in office. It was, Republicans who have control of Congress today that voted down a bill to increase access to mental health resources in schools. So these are the leaders that are saying all we have for you is thoughts and prayers, but every time they're given an opportunity to do something real, to take some action, they refuse to do it.
A constant refrain from the other side of the gun control debate is that this is about mental health rather than guns. Is there truth to that?
Well, first of all, no. If you look at the data, again, the data doesn't lie. You can try to make it whatever you want it to be, but the data doesn't lie. People who are in a state of mental health crisis are far more likely to be the victims of violence than they ever are to be the perpetrator. But even so, if you ask these people then, so what are you going to do about it? They'll say nothing. They'll throw their hands up. They'll say absolutely nothing. So if you're saying that the only thing that separates America from the rest of the world, the reason that this is a very uniquely American crisis is because we have worse mental health in this country than anywhere else on the planet, then what are you doing to fix it? Enough with the talking points, enough with the rhetoric. If you say you figured out what the root cause of the problem is, then do something about it.
Do you think we are any closer to seeing genuine reform on access to guns? Because it feels like this debate happens after every high-profile mass shooting, but nothing really changes, does it?
Yeah, I've told people that ever since the Pulse tragedy, I run on hope because it's all that I have left. But it's not a naive hope. I have seen the way we are able to make change even in this really divided political climate. Think about 2018, after the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and a group of teenagers helped lead a national movement that created Florida's first gun safety legislation in over 2 decades. I do believe in the power of the American people ultimately to have their final word on this.
How much of a hold do you think the gun lobby has over Donald Trump's Republican Party?
I think Donald Trump is available to the highest bidder, and the gun lobby has a whole lot of money. They're a part of that right-wing pie, but don't forget, they're just a part of it. There are a whole host of other entities that are also moving Donald Trump's hand, keeping him from taking action to keep people safe. I think the gun lobby has immense control in this country, but I've also seen them weakened in the last, 8-9 years. Everybody's pretty clear what the problem is, and everybody wants our leaders to take some kind of action. And we've seen that shift away from the NRA talking points for some time now.
So that's the case for gun control. But that's only half the story, half the viewpoint in America. Nathan Dahm is the director of the Oklahoma State Freedom Caucus Network. Before that, Nathan was chair of the Oklahoma Republican Party and was a state senator for Oklahoma for 12 years. He's known as one of the most conservative politicians in the country. He's also a strong proponent of gun rights and has been supported by the NRA, the National Rifle Association, which advocates for gun ownership. Nathan, thank you very much for joining us. What's your assessment of the tragedy last week in Minneapolis?
Obviously, anytime we see one of these types of tragedies, it's infuriating to see someone who would be so vile as to target innocent children or any innocent life in this manner. And so we always want to have our thoughts and prayers going towards those families as they are suffering this tragedy, just as if anyone were to be suffering a tragedy. It was frustrating to see this take place once again, especially to see some of the policies that have been put in place that have allowed this to happen, especially with gun-free school zones. They know that there's going to be innocent children there that are not going to be protected, are not going to be able to have someone there that will fight back and defend the lives of those innocent children.
You're offering thoughts and prayers. Is that enough?
No one claims that that's the only solution, but anytime there is a tragedy that takes place, our thoughts are with those that are suffering that tragedy, that loss of life, or any other tragedy. And so, yes, prayer is a part of the solution. It's not the only solution. It's not the overall solution. When I was in the state Senate, I introduced legislation to allow teachers and administrators to be able to carry firearms. The vast majority of these mass shootings that take place in America, over 90% of them take place in quote unquote gun-free zones, areas where they have signs up that say no guns allowed. So there are solutions, absolutely, that need to be pursued to allow citizens to be able to defend themselves.
So you believe more guns is the answer here?
Yes, and statistically that has been proven to be the case. As we've seen more states pass constitutional carry or allow for increased concealed carry permits for more law-abiding citizens to have firearms, we have seen that there has been a decrease in those firearm statistics in those areas.
There are more guns than people in the United States. More guns have resulted in more deaths. You argue that more guns would make us safer, but it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, does it?
Well, when you talk about gun deaths, one thing that is often misreported is that suicides are included in that. The vast majority of gun deaths are suicides. That is someone inflicting harm upon themselves. And so when you talk about gun deaths, yes, because there are more guns readily available, people in America oftentimes will choose that as their method of suicide. And when you look at it statistically with the number of firearms that are in America, over 400 million firearms, the number of firearms that are used to commit murder or any other violent crime is a statistically fraction of a percentage. So you're talking 399 million firearms that have never been used to commit a crime, that have never been used to commit murder, because it is a tool. It is an inanimate object. It is the individual that is responsible for their actions, not the inanimate object.
Even excluding suicide, though, there's about 20,000 deaths a year by firearm. That's unacceptable, isn't it? Something has to change.
Yes, and when you look at those statistics, a major portion of those are from young individuals that come from fatherless homes, So if we want to talk about actual solutions, having a father in the home greatly decreases the likelihood of somebody being incarcerated and going to jail. It greatly decreases the likelihood of them committing a crime, committing murder, just overall. So there is a fatherlessness issue in America where people don't have a father in the home, that aren't training these kids in the right manner. And when there isn't a father in the home, a lot of times these young men will look for that belonging. They find that in gang activity.
But other countries have fatherless homes, other countries have gangs, but they're not seeing this level of gun violence because there are tighter restrictions around who can own a gun.
Not gun violence, but they have violence with knives. I mean, even in the UK.
It's a lot harder to kill people with a knife than it is with an assault rifle.
It might be harder, but still people do that. Murder still happens. Violent crime still happens. It's still the individual that is responsible for that.
You don't kill 49 people with a knife, but you can do with an assault rifle.
Yes, but you can also do it with a vehicle. We've seen people that have, mowed people over with a car and have killed people with vehicles. If someone wants to commit an atrocity, they'll figure out a way to do that. We've seen people do that with bombs. We've seen people do that with other kitchen appliances here in America. Yes, you can make the case that, firearms can be more effective in killing, but they are also more effective deterrent in stopping crimes, and they're also a more effective deterrent in stopping tyranny. And that's one of the main foundational reasons that we have the Second Amendment here in America, is as a hedge against tyranny.
Is the defense of the Second Amendment worth another school shooting? What would you say to the parents of those children who were killed in Minneapolis last week, about your Second Amendment rights being worth more than their child's life?
Well, what you're saying is the Second Amendment is more important than, a child's life. No, that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that an individual is responsible for their actions, and the individual who committed that atrocity is responsible for their actions and taking the lives of those children. And so they should be held accountable. That would be like suggesting that in the UK, that all the British men should have to be castrated because of a bunch of Pakistani, rape gangs, and saying, oh, well, we got to castrate everyone. No, the people that are committing those horrific rapes, those violent crimes against those young British girls, they should be held responsible for it. The main reason we have the Second Amendment is so that we have it as a hedge against tyranny. When you see what has happened with governments time and time again, they have turned against their own people. And when you want to talk about gun deaths, or just murders or homicides in general, the greatest killer throughout human history outside of disease has been governments, most often against their own people, but even when they go to war with other people, with other nations. Governments have killed more people than any other entity throughout human history, and a lot of times against their own citizens.
Nathan, just to take you back to gun control legislation, one thing that a lot of people do believe works is a red flag law, which allows for the temporary removal of firearms from individuals that are deemed a threat to themselves or others. You passed legislation in Oklahoma when you were a state senator prohibiting those red flag laws being enacted. Why did you do that?
Because red flag laws violate almost every provision of the Bill of Rights. That's, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, our Bill of Rights. It violated our rights to free speech. It violated the right to keep and bear arms. In many instances, someone can make an anonymous accusation against you, which violates the right to face your accuser. In many instances, these are not jury trials. You can just go down the list of the Bill of Rights, and this violates the Bill of Rights in numerous regards when they've passed these red flag laws. So Oklahoma was the first state to pass an anti-red flag law, and I spearheaded that legislation. I wrote that and championed that and got that across the finish line, signed into law. Other states have followed suit now. Texas just did that this year as well. If the person is the threat, the person needs to be removed from society, and they need to have due process. They need to go through a stringent due process to do that. But if they are intent on committing crime, they will do so.
Do you think, Nathan, that the gun lobby has a hold over Republican leadership in this country, that there's too much money in guns? What would you say to people who believe that?
Oh, there's plenty more money on the other side of it. I mean, if you want to look at how much money Bloomberg and other groups have tried to put into their AstroTurf campaigns and stuff, they put all kinds of money into that. And I've worked with certain organizations, but I would say that the NRA, in many instances, doesn't go far enough for me. Now, in Oklahoma, they worked really well with us, but sometimes on the national level, they haven't been as pro-Second Amendment as they should be. I don't believe in compromise on our rights. I don't believe in compromise on the Second Amendment. It's not just gun rights, it's the right to self-defense. It says the right to keep and bear arms. And the reason for that is to be able to defend oneself, one's property, one's family from criminals, but also from the potential of tyranny from their own government.
So there you have two sides of the same story with views that seem totally incompatible with one another. How does America get past this, reconcile these two sides? Well, that's anyone's guess. In the meantime, there is more likely than not to be a mass shooting today, tomorrow, and the day after that, in every state, in every corner of the country, again and again. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Trump 100. I hope you've had a lovely weekend and a good Labour Day if you celebrate. Please do find us on social media on Sky News' Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. And if you type in Trump 100 Sky News on YouTube, you can watch this whole episode and others in full. Please do also drop us an email at trump100@sky.uk with any questions and comments, and we will see you later in the week.